I'm sure almost everyone, Marvel fan or not, has heard of Wolverine. And most of us know his story right down to every excruciating detail of how he was experimented on and had adamantium bonded to his bones. Insane, right? I can't even imagine the agony. But what if I told you that he's actually one of the lucky ones? What if I told you that Weapon X and the Weapon Plus program in general did far worse to some of its other subjects, all under the guise of scientific and military advancement? You see, Weapon Plus was a government-backed super soldier program, with Weapon X serving as its 10th major installment. Its projects experimented on human test subjects, including mutants, in an attempt to create enhanced soldiers and weapons. Weapon X experimented on Deadpool, while its successor program, the Facility, created X-23. But some of the results were far more horrifying. So today, we're going to cover 10 broken and monstrous creatures that never should have been created. Predator X. We're starting with a species that was specifically designed and built to kill mutants. Who am I kidding? Pretty much all of them were. But these creatures were requested by William Stryker to kill the mutant Antichrist. This was during the period when the Facility, a covert successor to the Weapon X program, was conducting its own experiments. One of its scientists, Dr. Adam Harkins, created the creatures that would ultimately be called Predator X. And if you were thinking the creation process was easy, it definitely wasn't. Samples of Cecily Kincaid's metallic skin were forcibly removed and used to reinforce the creatures. So it certainly wasn't easy on her either. These creatures were created by Christopher Yost, Craig Kyle, and Paco Medina, and they first debuted in New X-Men number 34. They had massive claws, razor-sharp teeth, and armored biometallic skin. Of course, they also possessed abilities like superhuman strength, endurance, and regeneration, but they could also adapt by assimilating useful traits from the mutant genetic material they consumed. Since they were created to hunt mutants, they could detect their prey through the X gene. There were originally 3 Predator X creatures. 2 were killed by a Sentinel and X-23, while the surviving creature was eventually killed by Wolverine during Messiah Complex. But believe me when I tell you that similar creatures and copies would return later. Weapon H, Clayton Cortez. Guys, what's worse than having a Hulk against you? Having Wolverine against you. But what's even worse than that? Facing some monstrous combination of these 2 insanely dangerous forces of the Marvel Universe. Yep, we're talking about Hulkverine, also known as Weapon H. But behind this monster is actually the tragic story of a man who is simply a soldier wanting to do some good. You see, when Clayton Cortez started working for the Eagle Star Corporation as a contractor, there was one particular mission where he faced a dilemma of the greatest kind. He could either do his duty and stand by his team as they slaughtered innocent villagers, or he could follow his conscience and refuse the horrific command. No surprises here, he chose the latter. But that decision had insurmountable consequences. Clayton turned against his fellow mercenaries and protected the villagers, so Eagle Star had him beaten, abducted, and sold to Weapon X as punishment. There, he underwent unimaginable torture and experimentation. He was injected with DNA harvested from Amadeus Cho and Old Man Logan, along with genetic material from other Weapon X subjects. He also underwent an adamantium bonding process supported by advanced nanotechnology. And holy hell, was that transformation absolutely brutal. What emerged was a creature who looked more monster than man, with the outward appearance and strength of a gray Hulk, along with Wolverine-like claws, enhanced senses, and a powerful healing factor. Yeah, it sounds cool, but at what cost? Somehow, the worst part of the transformation was that much of Clayton's mind and personality remained intact. He was just that strong-minded. Imagine having your mental faculties alive and kicking while your body and reality crumble around you. You live life as a biological weapon, even though all you want is to return to your wife Sonia and your children. Of course, Clayton eventually escaped the facility and broke free, but redemption was still far away. In the Hulkverine's miniseries by Greg Pak and artists Ario Anindito and Gio Villanova, he even faced Wolverine and the Immortal Hulk. But this half-man, half-monster was never truly a villain. He turned the tables and played the hero when needed, eventually fighting alongside groups such as the War Avengers. Skinless Man. That's quite a name, right? It makes you wonder exactly what they did to create this guy. Well, his name is pretty self-explanatory. Before he was horrifically experimented upon, the Skinless Man was a barrister named Harry Pizer. He was a mutant with elastic, durable, and multisensory skin that he could manipulate in extraordinary ways. But his life completely changed when he decided to join the Weapon Plus program. Who would ever willingly join that organization, right? But in Harry's eyes, he was simply helping his country during the Cold War, and that was his biggest mistake. His mutant gift was never treated as a gift. It was seen as a resource to harvest and exploit. Weapon Plus enhanced his strength and further improved his mutant abilities, transforming him into Weapon 3. He was then sent on espionage and assassination missions against the Soviet Union. But the real horror came when he was ordered to retrieve the Orb of Necromancy from Otherworld. Someone within Weapon Plus wanted the mission stopped and sent Phantom X to intercept him. Phantom X shot Harry and left him behind. After Harry was captured, the Captain Britain Corps punished him for the deaths he had caused by having him flayed alive. Just imagine that. His living skin was removed, leaving his muscles, tissues, nerves, and veins completely exposed. We can't even begin to imagine that kind of pain. And yet he survived. Phantom X later stole Harry's living skin and turned portions of it into sentient bullets. Harry, meanwhile, trained his exposed muscles to perform many of the functions his skin once handled. He eventually came looking for revenge against Phantom X and killed him by ripping out his heart. Tit for tat, I guess, although this particular feud went far beyond anything remotely reasonable. Project Venom, Earth 616. Now this one is quite an interesting tale. Project Venom wasn't just one entity. It was Weapon V, the fifth major stage associated with the Weapon Plus program. During the Vietnam War, S.H.I.E.L.D. recovered samples from Grendel, an ancient dragon-like symbiote connected to Null. Nick Fury oversaw the original Sim Soldier program, which bonded pieces of the symbiote to military operatives. The idea was to create symbiote-powered super soldiers who could replace conventional troops and potentially reproduce the success of Captain America. But the program ended in disaster. The operatives wore symbiotic suits created from Grendel's living matter, but the symbiotes gradually overwhelmed their minds and drove them into violent madness. After S.H.I.E.L.D. shut the program down, Weapon Plus secretly appropriated its surviving personnel and symbiote samples, creating Weapon V, also known as Project Venom. Soon, they had operatives wearing what were known as sim suits. The experiments stripped away the soldiers' control until they were trapped inside the symbiotes, unable to command their own bodies. They were used ruthlessly until there was almost nothing left of the people they had once been. That was their horrifying fate. Weapon 4, Man-Thing. Now this is probably a story some of you are already familiar with. After all, who hasn't heard of Man-Thing? But he too was indirectly connected to the weapon programs, specifically Weapon 4, also known as Project Sulfur. Interestingly, Dr. Ted Sallis wasn't merely a victim, he was one of the scientists leading the research. Sallis was a renowned biochemist working on the SO2 serum, which was designed to make soldiers immune to biological and chemical warfare. The problem was that an early version of the serum could transform its users into monsters. Sallis had also helped his friend Kurt Connors with research into cellular regeneration after Connors lost his arm, but that work was separate from the primary purpose of Project Sulfur. By the time Sallis completed another version of his serum, his life was already in danger. His wife, Ellen Brandt, had betrayed him to AIM, which wanted the formula. While fleeing an ambush and attempting to reach Kurt Connor's laboratory, Salas injected himself with the only remaining sample of the serum. His car then crashed into a swamp. But little did he know that the swamp was infused with powerful mystical energy. The serum mixed with the magic of the swamp and transformed Ted Salas into the infamous Man-Thing. Soon he lost most of his human intelligence and became a strange, plant-like creature. He killed the agents who had been sent after him and severely burned Ellen, who, unbeknownst to him, was pregnant. But can you blame him? A man of science had been transformed into a monster. He could barely speak, think, or remember anything about his former life. What remained was an instinctive sensitivity to the emotions of others. He became a kind of empath, but in a far more twisted way than you can imagine. When someone feels intense fear around him, his body secretes a powerful corrosive substance. After all, whatever knows fear burns at the Man-Thing's touch. They weren't kidding with that one, guys. He also possesses abilities such as superhuman strength, regeneration, and the ability to soften his body into a semi-liquid mass, allowing him to ooze through cracks and gaps. In certain stories, he's also demonstrated control over plant matter and access to the nexus of all realities. And to think that the weapon programs were connected to this transformation really makes you wonder how far their influence spread. Weapon 12, Huntsman. Now, this one is special because Weapon 12, also known as Zona Cluster 6 or the Huntsman, was one of the living weapons created inside the world. What is the world? Well, it was an artificial facility built by Weapon Plus where time itself was manipulated, flowing differently from the outside world. It allowed artificial evolution to occur across generations within a short period of real-world time. It was the perfect place for experiments, including the creation of Weapon 7. Huntsman was intended to become a Super Sentinel, created through artificial evolution and nano-sentinel technology. But he ended up becoming something much worse. You see, Huntsman was essentially a walking, breathing mind virus. His consciousness spread through physical contact and infected humans, animals, and even other beings. Once infected, victims became part of his hive mind. Their individual motivations were replaced by Huntsman's own thoughts and compulsions. Their eyes even began glowing like his. The situation became even more horrifying when Phantom X activated Huntsman's implanted kill switch. It destroyed Weapon 12, but it also killed everyone whose mind remained connected to him. What a gut punch. There was basically no safe way to escape him once his influence took hold. He even looked menacing, with his exposed coral-like brain and talons that he could extend to attack and infect others. God forbid those talons ever approach you. If they do, run. Run as fast as you can. Ultimaton. So, while Huntsman was Weapon 12 and Phantom X was Weapon 13, the world created yet another living weapon in the form of Weapon 15, also known as Ultimaton. Ultimaton was another Super Sentinel created using advanced Sentinel technology, but he was several generations more advanced than the weapons that came before him. He was designed to become the powerhouse of the Super Sentinels, a mutant hunting team that Weapon Plus hoped to present to the public as heroes. The real aim was to make the extermination of mutants seem acceptable. The world created him through artificial evolution, inside an environment where generations could pass while very little time moved outside. He was born as a literal weapon, shaped from the beginning by mutant hatred. But his creators could never have expected him to develop a conscience. A little voice inside his head began questioning his very existence and belief system. Why did he want to kill mutants? Why was he supposed to hate them with such venom? Could he have become something else? He even wondered whether he could have been a painter instead of a weapon. Unfortunately, Wolverine didn't give him the opportunity to find out. Wolverine detonated a bomb aboard the Weapon Plus space station, destroying him in the resulting explosion. But such powerful weapons rarely stayed dead. Ultimaton was eventually rebuilt inside the world and given new purposes, including guarding the young Apocalypse clone known as Evan Sabanur. As for his powers, he possessed superhuman strength, stamina, and speed. More uniquely, he could produce and absorb electromagnetic radiation, usually discharging that energy as electricity. His electromagnetic abilities also allowed him to fly, which would be pretty cool unless you're the mutant he was programmed to kill. Weapon 11, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Now, this one might confuse some of you because Weapon 11 is not officially established as Deadpool's Weapon Plus designation in the main Earth 616 comic continuity. However, Weapon 11 is the name given to the altered version of Wade Wilson in the movie X-Men Origins Wolverine. I know it's been a while, but how could we forget that version of Wade Wilson, also portrayed by Ryan Reynolds? This Wade Wilson had a rough childhood before eventually being recruited by William Stryker as part of Team X. But we all know William Stryker. He is one twisted soul with some horrific ideas, one of them being Weapon 11. Stryker took Wade Wilson and transformed him into the ultimate mutant killer. The aim was to create a literal Deadpool by pooling the powers of several mutants inside a single body. Wade's healing factor made him capable of surviving the process. He was taken to the 3 Mile Island facility and implanted with several stolen mutant abilities, including John Wraith's teleportation, Cyclops' optic blasts, Wolverine-like regeneration, and long retractable blades extending from his arms. What an insane power cocktail. We get to see all these abilities in action during the film's final battle. But the worst and most visually horrifying detail was that this merc was left without a mouth. Stryker was apparently fed up with Wade's constant talking and had his mouth sealed shut. And holy hell, did that sealed mouth look horrifying. This Weapon 11 was a hollow shell of the Deadpool audiences knew, controlled through commands delivered by Stryker's computer system and ultimately forced into a battle that was never truly his to fight. You honestly can't help but feel bad for the guy after everything he went through. Aldo Ferro, aka Cyborg. Now, this Weapon X monster doesn't look like your typical monster with massive claws and fangs. Instead, he appears as a frail old man paying the consequences of his own actions. Aldo Ferro was a mutant telepath who struck a devil's bargain with the Weapon X program. That's rule number 2 of things you should never do with Weapon X. The first is obviously not joining them in the first place, assuming you have a choice. Ferro willingly entered into an arrangement in which he would use his psychic abilities to help Weapon X alter the memories of its operatives, including Wolverine, Sabretooth, and Silver Fox. In exchange, he was promised immortality. And just so you know, this wasn't simple memory implantation. This involved breaking a person's mind and shattering their perception of reality until they could no longer trust their own memories. Ferro was one of the reasons Logan spent years unable to determine which parts of his past were real. But of course, karma eventually caught up with him. Weapon X failed to provide Ferro with the immortality he had been promised. His natural body continued aging and deteriorating, leaving him increasingly frail. So what did he do? He underwent a horrific cybernetic transformation to stay alive and protect his failing body. That's how Cyborg was born. His cybernetics granted him enhanced strength, endurance, and physical protection. His psychic abilities allowed him to alter memories and perceptions, and he could even disrupt the alpha waves inside other people's brains. Imagine having that much power and still using it to help the wrong side. That wouldn't be me, guys. H-Beta. And finally, last but not least, we've got another victim who didn't stand much of a chance against Weapon X. Robert Bobby Andrews already had a troubled past. He grew up alongside his brother Dave in a deeply abusive household. And if we know anything, abuse can seriously damage a person's life unless they receive proper help. Help was probably what the brothers thought they were looking for when they joined the Church of Human Potential, but they were thrown out because of their anti-mutant views. The brothers were eventually recruited into Weapon X through connections surrounding the church. Of course, we already knew what Weapon X was doing. It was creating adamantium-infused human weapons. But Bobby Andrews wasn't transformed into an ordinary cyborg. He became H-Beta, an early subject of the Batch H experiments, which combined genetic material from a Hulk and Wolverine with adamantium and cybernetic technology. Almost all of Bobby's higher mental functions were destroyed during the transformation process. And what's even sadder is that when Amadeus Cho and the Weapon X team stormed the facility, they were already too late to save him. Instead, we got to see a showdown between H-Beta and Amadeus Cho. It didn't stop there either. H-Beta wasn't the program's final creation. The real prize was H-Alpha, Clayton Cortez, whose transformation was finally complete. H-Alpha was unleashed during the same battle, and one of the first things he did was demonstrate his superiority by killing and decapitating H-Beta. What a tragic end. And that's the list, guys, except that this is barely a fraction of the bloody and horrifying history of the Weapon X and Weapon Plus programs. They left a long trail of victims behind them, and the programs kept coming back no matter how many times they were supposedly destroyed. So what do you guys think? Which one of these creatures was the worst creation? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to smash the like button if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.